"Wait,
Look
you're
at
putting
this
that
place.
inside me." The
I can't
lonely
believe we
cowboy froze
actually made
first,
it
but the
here.
giant
It's
bride
incredible.
smiled, and the cowboy had lived alone for so long that silence felt normal to him. His small ranch sat far from the main road, surrounded by wide land, dry grass, and an endless sky. Every morning he woke before sunrise, made strong coffee, and stepped outside to begin his work. The animals depended on him, and that responsibility gave his days a clear purpose. But when the work was done and night fell, the quiet became heavy. There was no one to talk to, no shared laughter, no warm voice waiting inside the house. People in nearby towns knew him as a good man but a distant one. He was polite, helpful, and honest, yet he never stayed long in conversations. If someone asked about his personal life, he would smile and change the subject. Years ago, he had been hurt in ways that made him cautious. He learned to rely only on himself. Over time, that caution slowly turned into loneliness, though he rarely admitted it even to himself. His days followed the same pattern: work, eat, sleep. On weekends, he sometimes rode into town for supplies. The town was small and news traveled fast. Everyone knew everyone else's business, which made him uncomfortable. He preferred the open land where no one asked questions. Still, there were moments when he watched families together or couples walking side by side, and a quiet ache settled in his chest. One afternoon, an old friend stopped by the ranch. The friend had known him since childhood and spoke more freely than most. Over coffee, the friend gently pointed out that the cowboy had been alone for too long. He mentioned a local community gathering happening the following week, a simple event meant to bring people together. The cowboy brushed it off at first, saying he was too busy. But the friend didn't push hard. He only said, "You don't have to stay long, just show up." For days after that conversation, the idea stayed in the cowboy's mind. He didn't like crowds, but something inside him felt tired of the same empty evenings. On the day of the event, he almost didn't go. He stood in his doorway for a long time, hat in hand, debating. Finally, he told himself that staying for even 10 minutes would be enough. The gathering was held in a large open hall near the town center. There were simple decorations, food tables, and groups of people talking and laughing. As soon as he walked in, he felt out of place. He stood near the wall, unsure of where to look. Just as he considered leaving, he noticed her. She was taller than most people in the room, with a strong posture and calm presence. She moved easily through the crowd, greeting people with a warm smile. There was nothing loud or forced about her. She seemed comfortable in her own skin. When their eyes met for a brief moment, he looked away quickly, feeling strangely nervous. They didn't speak right away. Time passed, and the cowboy remained on the edge of the room. Eventually, someone introduced them by chance. She offered her hand and said her name clearly with confidence. He shook her hand and noticed how steady she was. Her smile wasn't teasing or curious, it was kind. Their first conversation was simple. They talked about the weather, the land, and the event. She asked questions and listened carefully to his answers. He wasn't used to that. Most people either talked too much or judged his silence. She did neither. The conversation felt easy, even though he spoke less than she did. Before he realized it, they had been talking for a long time. When the event ended, she thanked him for the conversation and said she hoped to see him again. There was no pressure in her words. She didn't ask for promises or explanations. She simply walked away, leaving him standing there, surprised by how much he wished the conversation hadn't ended. Over the following weeks, they met again by coincidence, then by choice. Sometimes it was in town, sometimes on the ranch when she stopped by with a reason that felt casual but thoughtful. She never rushed him. She understood his quiet nature and didn't try to change it. Instead, she met him where he was. The cowboy found himself opening up slowly. He talked about his work, his past, and the reasons he preferred being alone. She listened without judgment. In return, she shared her own story, how she had learned to be strong, independent, and honest about her needs. She had faced her own challenges and had grown from them. What surprised him most was how safe he felt around her. There was no fear of being misunderstood. Still, that safety also scared him. He wasn't used to letting someone see the parts of him he had hidden for years. Each time the connection grew deeper, a small voice inside him warned him to be careful. As their bond grew, so did the questions in his mind. He wondered what it would mean to truly share his life again. His home, his routines, his space, these were things he had guarded closely. The idea of change made him uneasy. Yet when he imagined his future without her, the loneliness felt sharper than ever. One evening, as they sat quietly watching the sunset over the land, he realized something important. The silence between them didn't feel empty. It felt full, comfortable, and warm. For the first time in years, he wasn't alone in his thoughts. That realization both comforted and frightened him. Deep inside, he knew that meeting her had already changed him. Even if he didn't yet understand how far that change would go, there was no denying that his carefully built walls had begun to crack. And though he didn't say it out loud, he sensed that his quiet life was standing at the edge of something new, something that would soon test his courage in ways he never expected. As the days passed, the cowboy's life slowly began to change in ways he never planned. He still woke before sunrise and worked the land with the same discipline, but his thoughts were no longer empty. Her presence stayed with him, even when she was not there. He found himself looking forward to their next meeting, something he had not felt in many years. They began spending more time together, usually in simple ways. Sometimes she visited the ranch in the late afternoon, bringing fresh food or just an excuse to talk. Other times, they met in town for quiet walks or shared meals. There was no rush between them. Everything grew at a natural pace, and that made him feel both calm and uncertain. She was different from anyone he had known before. She spoke clearly about her thoughts and feelings, not with demand but with honesty. She believed that strong relationships were built on truth, not silence. At first, this approach made the cowboy uncomfortable. He was used to keeping his worries inside, believing that speaking them aloud only made things worse. One evening, while they sat outside the ranch house, she asked him about his fears. The question was gentle, not sudden. He hesitated, staring at the ground, unsure how to answer. No one had asked him that so directly before. After a long pause, he admitted that he was afraid of losing himself if he let someone too close. He feared that sharing his life meant giving up control of the small world he had built to protect himself. She listened carefully and didn't interrupt. When he finished, she nodded and told him she understood more than he might think. She explained that independence did not disappear when two people chose to walk together. Instead, it became something shared and respected. Her words stayed with him long after she left that night. As weeks turned into months, their bond deepened. People in town began to notice and quietly talk. Some were surprised that the quiet cowboy had found someone so confident and strong. Others smiled, happy to see him less alone. He tried not to let the attention bother him, but it added to the pressure he already felt inside. The idea of a shared future slowly entered their conversations. She spoke about building a life that allowed both of them to grow. She talked about trust, support, and the importance of standing together during difficult times. These ideas made sense to him, yet they also stirred old fears. He worried about making promises he might not be able to keep. One afternoon, she asked if they could talk seriously. They sat at the kitchen table, sunlight streaming through the window. She explained that she cared deeply for him and wanted to know if he could imagine a future that included her fully. Her tone was calm, not demanding. Still, the question felt heavy. He felt his chest tighten as he searched for words. He cared for her, that much was clear. But imagining a life where decisions were shared felt overwhelming. He told her he needed time to understand his feelings. She accepted his honesty and told him that taking time was better than giving an answer filled with doubt. That night, the cowboy couldn't sleep. He walked outside under the stars, thinking about his past and the walls he had built around his heart. He realized that those walls had once protected him, but now they were keeping him from something meaningful. Still, lowering them felt risky. The next day, he noticed small changes in himself. He smiled more easily, spoke more openly, and felt less weighed down by silence. He knew these changes came from her influence, and that realization scared him. Depending on someone else felt dangerous, even if it also felt right. As they continued to talk, she introduced the idea of deeper commitment. Not in a sudden or dramatic way, but as a natural step forward. She spoke about sharing responsibilities, supporting each other's dreams, and building a home that felt safe for both of them. Her words were thoughtful, and she made it clear that she did not want to take over his life, only to be part of it. At times, he found himself pulling back emotionally, afraid of moving too fast. She noticed and addressed it gently, reminding him that honesty mattered more than speed. Her patience impressed him. She didn't push or threaten to leave. Instead, she stayed steady, showing him that trust could be built without pressure. The cowboy began to see her strength in a new way. It wasn't just physical or visible. It was emotional strength, the kind that allowed someone to stand firm without forcing others to follow. Being with her made him question his old belief that love always led to loss. Yet despite this growing understanding, fear still lived inside him. Each step forward felt like stepping onto uncertain ground. He worried about failing her, about not being enough, about losing the quiet life he had known for so long. One evening, after a long conversation about the future, he found himself silent again. She watched him closely and asked if he was afraid. He didn't deny it. He admitted that he was scared of change, even though part of him wanted it deeply. She smiled softly and told him that fear was not a sign of weakness. It was a sign that something mattered. Her words brought him comfort, but they also reminded him that a decision would soon be necessary. As the sun set and shadows grew long, the cowboy realized that he was standing at a crossroads. One path led back to the safety of solitude. The other led forward into uncertainty, shared responsibility, and deeper connection. He didn't yet know which path he would choose, but he understood that doing nothing was no longer an option. The cowboy felt the weight of his thoughts growing heavier each day. What once felt like quiet comfort now felt like a place where questions echoed too loudly. He still loved the open land, the steady work, and the calm routines, but something had changed inside him. The life he once protected so carefully now felt incomplete. She continued to be patient, but he could sense that time was moving forward whether he was ready or not. Their conversations had become deeper, touching subjects he once avoided completely. They talked about trust, shared choices, and how two people could grow together without losing who they were. Even though her words were gentle, they forced him to face truths he had ignored for years. One afternoon, she came to the ranch earlier than usual. Her expression was calm but serious. They sat together on the porch, the wind moving softly through the grass. She told him that she cared deeply for him, but she needed clarity. She said she wasn't asking for perfection or sudden change, only honesty about whether he could truly open his life to her. Her words stayed simple, but they reached deep. He felt his throat tighten. For a moment, he couldn't speak. His mind filled with memories of past hurt, broken trust, and the long years he spent convincing himself that being alone was safer. He had built his life carefully, piece by piece, making sure nothing could shake it. Letting someone fully inside felt like taking a risk he had never planned for. He finally spoke, slowly and carefully. He admitted that the idea of sharing his life scared him more than anything else. He said he feared losing control, feared making mistakes, and feared being unable to give her what she deserved. Saying these words out loud made him feel exposed but also lighter. She listened quietly, her eyes steady on his. When he finished, she didn't respond right away. Instead, she took a deep breath and told him something he didn't expect. She said that commitment wasn't about giving up control. It was about choosing to trust someone enough to face uncertainty together. She reminded him that she wasn't asking to take his life from him, only to walk beside him. Still, doubt remained. That night after she left, the cowboy sat alone in his kitchen for hours. He replayed the conversation again and again. He realized that his fear wasn't really about her. It was about himself. He doubted his ability to change, to grow, to be strong in ways that didn't involve physical work or quiet endurance. Over the next few days, he grew quieter than usual. She noticed and gave him space, trusting him to work through his thoughts. The distance, though gentle, made him uneasy. For the first time, he felt what life might be like if she walked away. The thought left a hollow feeling in his chest. He began to see how much she had already become part of his life. Simple things reminded him of her: an empty chair at the table, the quiet evenings, the way the ranch felt less alive without her presence. He realized that loneliness wasn't just about being alone. It was about not sharing the important parts of life with someone who understood. One evening, she asked to meet him in town. They sat at a quiet spot away from others. She spoke honestly, telling him that she respected his fears but needed to know whether he was willing to take a step forward. She said she didn't want to pressure him, but she also couldn't stay in a place of uncertainty forever. Her honesty struck him deeply. He understood that love required effort and courage, not just feelings. Avoiding a decision was, in its own way, a decision. He felt torn between the comfort of his old habits and the possibility of something fuller. That night he walked the land under the stars, thinking about the life he wanted in the years ahead. He imagined growing older alone, the days blending together, the silence growing deeper. Then he imagined a life shared, filled with challenges but also warmth, support, and meaning. Neither path was without difficulty, but only one offered growth. The next time they met, he tried to explain what he was feeling. He told her that he wanted to move forward, but needed reassurance that he wouldn't lose himself in the process. She responded with calm strength, telling him that healthy partnership made room for both people. She promised to respect his boundaries while also building something new together. Despite her reassurance, the cowboy felt a moment of panic rise inside him. The idea of permanent change made his heart race. In a moment of nervous honesty, he reacted strongly to one of her suggestions about deeper shared responsibility. His words came out sharper than he intended, filled with surprise and fear. As soon as he said them, he wished he could take them back. For a brief moment, the air between them felt tense. He expected disappointment or anger. Instead, she remained calm. She looked at him with understanding, as if she had seen this reaction coming. She reminded him that fear often speaks louder than reason when someone is standing at the edge of change. Her calm response made him realize how much strength she carried. She wasn't shaken by his fear. She didn't see it as rejection. She saw it as something to work through together. That realization humbled him. Still, the moment marked a turning point. He understood that he could no longer hide behind silence or hesitation. A choice was approaching fast. Either he would step forward with courage, or he would retreat into the safety he knew so well. As they parted that evening, he felt both scared and hopeful. The road ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. His old life of quiet avoidance was no longer possible. Something had been set in motion, and whatever came next would change him forever. The days after that tense moment felt different for the cowboy. Nothing dramatic happened on the surface, but inside him, something was shifting. He noticed it in small ways. He paused longer before speaking. He listened more carefully, not just to her, but to himself. The fear was still there, but it no longer felt like a wall. It felt more like a door that had been closed for a long time and was now slowly opening. She did not bring up the moment again right away. Instead, she stayed steady just as she always had. She came to the ranch as usual, helped with simple tasks, shared quiet meals, and talked about ordinary things. Her calm behavior surprised him. He had expected distance or disappointment, but she showed neither. That patience began to soften something deep inside him. One evening, while they worked together fixing a broken fence, he finally spoke. He told her he had been thinking about his reaction and that he was sorry for how sudden it had been. He explained that when change felt too close, his instinct was to freeze or push back. Saying this out loud made him feel exposed, but also honest. She listened, resting her hands on the fence, and nodded slowly. She said she understood more than he realized. She shared that she, too, had faced moments in her life where growth felt frightening. The difference, she said, was learning to stand in that fear instead of running from it. Her words were gentle, not instructional. They felt like an invitation, not a demand. That night, the cowboy slept better than he had in weeks. For the first time, he felt like he wasn't fighting his fear alone. He realized that strength didn't always mean standing firm by yourself. Sometimes, it meant allowing someone else to stand with you. As time passed, they began making small changes together. Nothing big or overwhelming. She spent more time at the ranch, and they started sharing daily routines. Cooking meals together, planning work schedules, talking about improvements to the land. These shared moments showed him that cooperation didn't erase his independence. Instead, it made his days feel fuller and more balanced. Still, doubts returned from time to time. Late at night, when the house was quiet, his old thoughts crept back. He worried about failing her trust or not being able to meet her expectations. But now, instead of letting those thoughts grow in silence, he shared them with her. Each time he did, the weight became easier to carry. One afternoon, she asked him to sit with her and talk openly. There was no tension in her voice, only sincerity. She told him that she believed in what they were building, but she wanted to make sure they were moving forward together, not just drifting. She spoke about partnership as something active, something that required choice every day. He listened carefully. When it was his turn to speak, he admitted something important. He said that for most of his life, he believed love required giving something up: space, freedom, peace. But being with her was teaching him that love could also add things: understanding, support, and shared strength. Saying this made him feel emotional in a way he wasn't used to. She smiled, not in relief, but in recognition. She told him that this understanding was the foundation of trust. She wasn't looking for perfection or certainty. She only wanted honesty and effort. Her clarity made things feel simpler than he had imagined. As they continued to grow closer, the people around them noticed the change. Friends saw the cowboy laugh more, speak more freely, and carry himself differently. He seemed lighter, as if a burden he had carried for years was finally loosening. Even he noticed it in the way he greeted mornings, no longer with quiet endurance but with purpose. One evening, as they watched the sun dip below the horizon, she shared a story from her past. She spoke about a time when she had trusted someone who wasn't ready, and how that experience taught her the importance of mutual commitment. She made it clear that she wasn't afraid of fear itself. She was afraid of standing still while life passed by. Her honesty struck him deeply. He realized that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. He understood now that avoiding pain also meant avoiding growth, and growth, though uncomfortable, was necessary. The next days felt like preparation, even though nothing official was planned. He found himself thinking about the future in real terms, not vague ideas. He thought about shared mornings, shared decisions, and shared responsibility. These thoughts no longer caused panic. Instead, they brought a quiet sense of readiness. There was one moment late one night when he stood alone outside the ranch house, looking at the land that had defined his life for so long. He realized that this place would always be part of him. Letting someone else into it did not mean losing it. It meant trusting someone to respect it as much as he did. When he finally spoke to her about this realization, she listened with a soft expression. She didn't celebrate or rush ahead. She simply took his hand and thanked him for trusting her with his truth. That simple gesture meant more to him than any promise could have. By the end of that season, the cowboy understood something important. The fear that once controlled him had not disappeared, but it no longer ruled his choices. He had learned that strength could be quiet, patient, and shared. And as he stood beside her, looking toward a future that was still uncertain but no longer lonely, he knew he was ready for the final step, not because the fear was gone, but because he no longer faced it alone. The final step did not come with loud moments or sudden changes. It arrived quietly, the way most important things do. One morning, the cowboy woke up and realized that the fear which once controlled his thoughts no longer decided his actions. It was still there, but it no longer held power over him. He felt calm, steady, and ready in a way he had never felt before. Their days had settled into a shared rhythm. Mornings began with simple routines, work divided naturally, conversations flowing without effort. There was no struggle over space or control. Instead, there was understanding. He noticed how easily they supported each other, especially during difficult days. When work went wrong or plans changed, they faced it together instead of pulling apart. One evening, after a long day, they sat quietly outside, watching the sky fade into night. The land was peaceful and the air was still. The cowboy felt a strong sense of clarity. He turned to her and spoke with honesty and calm. He told her that he was ready to move forward fully, not just in words but in action. He said he wanted to build a future together, one that allowed both of them to grow while staying true to themselves. She listened carefully, her expression soft but strong. When he finished, she smiled, not in surprise but with deep understanding. She told him she believed in him, not because he was fearless, but because he chose courage. She said that choosing each other every day mattered more than any single promise. From that moment on, things felt different, not dramatic but solid. They began planning their future in practical ways. They talked about shared goals, responsibilities, and how they would support each other through change. These conversations no longer caused tension. Instead, they felt like steps forward. The cowboy noticed how much he had changed. He was more open with his thoughts and feelings. He asked for help when needed, something he once believed was a weakness. He realized that strength did not disappear when shared. It grew stronger. People around them noticed the transformation too. Friends commented on his calm confidence and how grounded he seemed. The man who once avoided connection now welcomed it. He still valued quiet moments, but they were no longer filled with loneliness. They were filled with peace. As time passed, they faced challenges together. Not everything was easy. There were disagreements, moments of stress, and days when old habits tried to return. But instead of pulling away, they talked through problems. They listened. They adjusted. The cowboy learned that commitment was not about perfection, but effort. One night, during a particularly hard week, he found himself overwhelmed. The pressure of responsibility, change, and expectation weighed on him. Instead of shutting down, he spoke openly. He shared his worries, his doubts, and his exhaustion. She listened without judgment, offering support without trying to fix everything. That moment showed him how far he had come. He realized then that love was not about being strong all the time. It was about being honest when you were. That understanding changed the way he saw himself and his future. As seasons changed, the ranch felt different too. It was no longer just a place of work. It became a home shared by two people who respected and understood each other. Small moments carried meaning: shared meals, quiet mornings, simple laughter. These moments reminded him that the life he once feared losing had actually become richer. One afternoon, while walking the land together, the cowboy stopped and looked around. He felt gratitude for the path he had taken, even with its fears and doubts. He realized that avoiding pain had also meant avoiding joy. Choosing connection had given him both, and he accepted that balance with maturity. Later that evening, he told her something important. He said that for a long time, he believed he had to face life alone to stay strong. But now he understood that true strength came from trust, patience, and shared effort. She smiled and told him that growth often begins when we stop trying to protect ourselves from everything. Their future was not perfect, but it was real. They faced life as partners, not because they needed each other to survive, but because they chose to walk together. That choice made all the difference. Years later, the cowboy would look back on the moment he almost walked away. He would remember how fear had frozen him, how close he came to returning to solitude, and he would be thankful that he chose courage instead. The quiet life he once protected had not disappeared. It had transformed. In the end, the lonely cowboy was lonely no more. Not because he lost himself, but because he finally allowed himself to be seen, understood, and supported. And in that choice, he found a deeper kind of freedom, one built not on distance but on trust.